Hey guys, it's Jessica Dupuis. Hope you can join us today. I'm excited to talk about Arizona wine today with Todd Bostock, and he should be joining us soon. For those of you who don't know that much about Arizona wine, I think it's a place that you need to start paying attention to, especially if you're looking for different emerging regions within the American states. Arizona just kind of speaks to me with this amazing ability to get fruit that's just high quality. They make some beautiful wines. Hey there, how are you doing? Oh my goodness, we've got someone visiting us all the way from Alto Adige, Italy. That's so exciting. Hey JR, nice to see you too. In just a couple of minutes, we are going to be welcoming Todd Bostock, and I'm super excited to have him along with us today. A lot of what we'll be experiencing, or hopefully what you'll be learning, is just how unique the growing regions of Arizona are. And it's not a place that a lot of people often think about when it comes to wine, but hopefully after this, you get a little bit of a taste, or sorry, not literally a taste. But hopefully you'll get an opportunity to want to taste some more of it. Oh hey, a few more people have joined. So nice to see you. Thanks for coming. JT Welford, awesome. We've got Dukeman Family Winery with us. Yay. And you know, this actually brings up an interesting point for me. I think it's really interesting what I've learned in writing this book, The Wines of Southwest USA, is taking a look at both like Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado all together, and then getting a feel for, sorry, I'm just trying to check to make sure that we've got Todd joining us here in a couple of minutes. But then understanding that all of these different regions, we're all very close to each other. However, a lot of us don't actually know each other. So I hope that, especially with a book like this coming out, that people start to maybe want to kind of reach hands over the state borders to kind of get an understanding of what everybody else is doing just on the other side of the fence, if you will. So hopefully we will see Todd here in just a second. I'm going to just double check to make sure that he's on his way. And I'm actually really excited for y'all to talk to him. So Todd has been involved with Arizona wine, and I'll be sure to let you guys hear his story straight from him. But Todd has been a part of Arizona wine for a long time now, but he actually started out in it kind of as a whim. He was curious about wine. He started doing a little bit of poking around and helping out with some of the more well-known wineries in the state. And all of a sudden now he's kind of the owner. He and his wife Kelly both run a winery in the Sonoyta area. And it'll be super fun to have him tell that story. So hopefully he will be joining us here, and we can actually hear it from him. I mean, I don't mind telling the story, but I think it's really great to hear it from the horse's mouth, if you will. So as I mentioned, Arizona wine is really interesting because, again, it's desert wine, really. We can easily just call it desert wine, high desert wine even in some places, because some of the regions in the very far west, southwest corner have some vineyards that are growing at over 5,000 feet, which is pretty cool when you consider that a lot of the higher elevation vineyards in America are more at like the 3,500, maybe 4,000 feet range. With the exception, of course, of Colorado, which does have something like, I think their vineyards get up to 7,000 feet in some places. So at that point, we're talking something very similar to what you might find in, the Andes Mountains. So either on Argentina or Chile, depending on which side you're on of the mountains, but definitely that kind of mountain wine, if you will. Oh, good. I just got a note from Todd. He's on his way. Dos Cabezas has joined, and I'm excited to introduce you guys to him. And I really hope that you guys will start to take a look at Arizona wines after we've had a chance to talk for a little bit. So here he comes. Let me go ahead and add this, and it's just waiting for the connection here. And we'll see him here in just 1 second. Yeah, we got it. Hey, there he is.
Hey,
Hey, how are ya?
good. How are you? Sorry about that.
No, that's
This
okay.
is my
That's
first
okay.
Instagram live, so
It's
I had
okay.
to figure it out.
That's what's great about IG Live. You can just kind of ramble. I've been telling them all about Arizona wine, and um, I think you might be able to do a better job than me.
Oh yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I think a lot of the people that have joined so far, it's pretty fun. We've got someone from Alto Adige. We've got a couple people from Texas.
Oh, cool.
So hopefully they can kind of get a glimpse of what it is that Arizona wine is all about. Um, and so I wonder if first you could maybe give us a lay of the land. Like what are there, how many growing regions are there in Arizona, and what should people kind of understand when they approach Arizona wine in terms of a growing region as a whole?
So there's three major growing regions. So the
Okay.
major ones are Wilcox and Sonoyta in the south, and then the Verde Valley in the north. Most of the grapes right now in the state come from the Wilcox area,
Okay.
and then there's a few outliers, around the state, which time will tell if those grow into bigger areas. But for now, the most part, there's really just three major regions
Okay.
in Arizona. So, and I'm excited about our Alto Adige person. We'll have to ask if we'll have to ask him about
Yes,
Turner a little bit.
yes. He's actually a grower of Lagrine, which is it's pretty cool. I got to visit them actually almost this time last year, a little bit in September, and it was so fun. I'll have to send you his information so you can make sure to reach out to him. But the wines they make there, they call them high altitude wines.
Yes.
However, it's interesting because I was just talking about before you came on how Arizona even has a couple of vineyard locations that are at about 5,000 feet, where Eric
Yeah.
Blomsky, I think, has a couple of vineyards. And I think that's really unique because a lot of people don't really grow wine at that elevation, or they think they might have a high elevation site, but actually places like this are higher.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Sonoyta, Wilcox, and Verde Valley. Where are you getting a lot of your fruit from?
So we farm two vineyards in the south. So we farm the 37-acre Cimarron vineyard in Wilcox, which was planted. We started planting in was it 2005? Dickie Rath started planting that vineyard, and then we bought it from him in 2011.
Okay.
And then we have the Pronghorn vineyard in Sonoyta, which is at 15 acres that we started planting in 2004. And so Pronghorn's at 4,700 feet. Cimarron's at 4,300 feet, so about 500-foot elevation difference. And overwhelming, well, with few exceptions, all the fruit for our wines comes from those vineyards.
That's pretty amazing. Tell me what like the quality, or what are some of the characteristics of the fruit, in Wilcox versus Sonoyta, and kind of why you like the two.
Well, I like them because they're different. Well, first of all, it's helpful because they're isolated, right? So they're less likely to experience the same catastrophic events. So I enjoyed that. But so Wilcox, being at lower elevation, is on a kind of gentle, sandy slope. So
Okay.
soil's a little more uniform. The climate's a little more mild. Those wines or grapes we tend to harvest. That growing season tends to start maybe about 3-4 weeks early on average, and harvest 3 to 4 weeks earlier than Sonoyta on average.
Okay.
And then Sonoyta comes out 3 to 4 weeks later. And so what we see from Wilcox is typically wines that are more approachable when they're young, a little rounder, a little softer tannin, a little more fruit driven. And then the wines from Sonoyta tend to be a little more rustic. They can be a little more angular. They can be a little more kind of old worldy, and a little less round tannin.
Okay.
And so anyway, in my opinion, that's for red wines, obviously.
Yeah.
And then, gosh, for white wines, it is similar. Wilcox tends to be more fruit driven, and then in Sonoyta you get more of like a saline, salty, almost mineral driven kind of aspect.
Okay, so I like that you're talking about how you can have, some fruit that's coming up, and the wines are, as a result, are going to have more of an, I don't know. I don't find you guys to be super New World, but riper, softer kind of fruit, and some of that. But then a lot of what it seems to me is that Arizona really kind of represents Old World. So, that more, you get more earthy tertiary flavors in addition to really, really nice fruit on the palate as well. I guess it's probably worth knowing like kind of how you got into this. Before you joined us, I started to say that this has kind of been your career pretty much forever. So, and it was almost a whim that you got into it, or kind of by accident, or how did you get into Arizona wine in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. I got lucky. That's the short answer. Yeah, I had no idea how. I never really figured out how the university worked. So, I started at U of A as a studio art major, and then I liked all the things that you could do.
Yeah.
So throughout, I went to like U of A, ASU, Grand Canyon. I was an art major, math major, business major, an engineering major, and dropped out, went back, and dropped out, went back. And that it turns out that's not a very sustainable way to do college. And when I dropped out for the last time, I was getting off the freeway to go to ASU, and you have to turn right to go to class. And I gotta make sure my kids aren't watching this. And I turned left instead, and then I went and got breakfast, and I was like, now what are you gonna do? So I started a short-lived. Well, it's not that short. I started a printing company with my
Right.
sister and dad, and that was. I don't know if you ever watched Arrested Development. I felt like Joe Bluth after the first day. It was like a huge mistake. And yeah, that was like a terrible fit for me. But that lasted from like 2000 until 2006. And during that time, I was always interested. I grew up in a house where my family didn't drink wine or anything really. My parents had the same bottle of Behringer White Zinfandel in their fridge for like the duration of my development at that house. And yeah, but it was always fascinating to me. Like I had friends whose parents, drank wine. It was always interesting, and I was interested. I'd worked in restaurants around,
Okay.
and so at some point I finally got up and it felt like $100 for like a home wine kit was such a massive cost, or like be super indulgent at the time. So I had like a young kid and this business, and but I finally took the plunge and bought a kit, made wine from concentrate at home. It was like terribly unsatisfying, but like in a way where you're like, there has to be more than this. Like I want to get to the bottom of it. And so I tried to get fruit, and so I started taking courses at UC Davis. They had at the time they send you the tapes on VHS.
Yeah.
And you watch the lectures, and then this was like school I could get behind, because like while you're taking the class, I would buy wines related to what we were studying and go through them while we were studying whatever we were studying. And we got to a point about like American regional wine. And at this point, I had in my head I was moving to California, right? I was going to go get a job in California, work in a cellar. And I thought I should try. I didn't even think about wine from Arizona. And so I went to AJ's local wine shop and wanted to pick up a bottle of Arizona wine. And the two they recommended were Dos Cabezas and Callaghan. Callaghan was like $2 more expensive, and that like was a deal breaker for me. So I got the Dos Cabezas Sauvignon Blanc and went home and had it. And like the sun was going down, I popped in the VHS tapes, and I tasted this stuff, and it was of a quality that was as good as anything else I had from any place else. But it tasted so different that like the light went off, and I was like, oh, okay. Like how cool that like what Kent was already doing to be a part of figuring out what a place tastes like. Like it just dawned on me then, in this context, that if I went to California, like you kind of know what you're signing up for. If you went to Oregon, you know what you're signing up for. But in Arizona, there's this like opportunity to kind of mine that, and that was really exciting to me. So I immediately volunteered to work at wineries, and the only one that would take me was Dos Cabezas.
So who was making wines for Dos Cabezas at that time?
So at that time, it was Frank DeCristofano. Okay. And he was from Chicago, transplanted to Tucson, and unfortunately for him, he was having some health issues, which is the only thing that created the opportunity for me, because he needed help. I'm sure if he didn't need help, he probably wouldn't have wanted it. And so I apprenticed with Frank for I started in October, just after harvest of 2002, and then became the winemaker in 8 months later, because he finally had to get out. And so I did that first harvest. I skipped the part about Oregon, whatever. I flew to Oregon at one point and got grapes from Eras, the vineyard across the street from Eras Vineyard, the Bella Vita Vineyard. and
Yeah.
flew them back to Arizona and made some terrible wine from those grapes. That was 100% user error on my part, nothing to do with the vineyard. And since I'd made 5 gallons of wine from grapes, and then did that first harvest in '03, and we did like 1,500 cases. So I had to like learn really quick. And I'm not.
So, and it's important to note, you're saying Dick Erath. That's the same Oregon winemaker of Erath wines. A lot of people know that particular producer, and I think it's worth mentioning at this point. You know, like he kind of made an investment in Arizona wine. He was interested.
Yeah,
and
that's part of the whole serendipity of the thing is that. So I couldn't get grapes in Arizona. There just wasn't a lot to make wine at home. And so I mentioned this to my folks, and my dad had a connection in Oregon who had a new vineyard coming into production. So they offered to let me take some back. So I flew up there, got those grapes, brought them home, was making them in my garage. It just happened to be across the street from the Erath vineyard, which I used as like the landmark for where it was. And so when I was looking to volunteer, Callaghan or here, the winemaker for Dos Cabezas at the time, De Cristofano, was friends with Erath.
Yeah.
Turns out he lived in Tucson part-time, which I did not know. So when I talked about, I've got these, he's like, what experience do you have? And I'm like, oh man, I'm making wine in my closet from these grapes I got across the street from the Erath vineyard. And he was like, oh, I'm friends with Dick, you should come help us out. And then it turns out, Erath was kind of interested in what we were doing. He had this house in Tucson, and he wanted to shade one of the walls. So he saw that they were growing grapes at the U of A in the experimental vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went to talk to the guy who at that time was De Cristofano about what he could plant to shade his wall. They kind of hit it off, became friends. He learned about what Dos Cabezas was doing, bought the vineyard property right next door, and planted the Cimarron vineyard. And then we became friends through that. So it was like a really roundabout, like I said, you just, like you say yes and things unfold the way they're supposed to, and you wind up getting opportunities. So it's really just meant to be.
Yeah, and now that's your vineyard.
Yeah. So we got the first fruit off that vineyard that Erath planted in 2008, and then ended up buying it from him in 2011 when he tried to retire again for like the third time. It was like Kiss, farewell tour. He's retiring, and he plants like a 50-acre vineyard.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah. So, and then then we bought the vineyard from him. And it was like the last farewell tour, and he's talking about getting back in with a new brand in Oregon. So, who knows?
That is so cool. So I noticed you were swirling a glass. I'm going to do the same.
All right.
What do you have here?
I thought it'd be a good idea for all of us because people love nothing more than to watch other people drink middle of the day while they're at work, probably. So 2019 Syrah. So
yes.
We sent this to
Jessica.
Jessica.
Just so people know. Oh, sorry, backwards. Boop.
Yeah, there it is. So this is a new release for us, kind of a fun new wine. So we started experimenting a few years ago with some carbonic maceration. We made like a Beaujolais Nouveau ripoff for Garage East, which is the project we have in Gilbert, Arizona. And we had done some kind of one-offs, and then was really inspired by, like the wines from the Cru Beaujolais stuff, and then even the stuff that PAX in California is doing. And so, what dawned on us, and one of the challenges here is freshness, right? Like it's really easy to ripen stuff, but then you want to keep it refreshing, and you also want something that you can drink in Arizona when it's Phoenix when it's like 110. I don't know how many. That's like a record number of days over 110 this year. And sometimes like you don't want white wine, but you don't want to be beat over the head or like tired out with something that's like 15% alcohol. Anyway, so long story short, it dawned on us that we could use this carbonic maceration as maybe a blending component to help freshen up some of the other wines. And so we finally got some equipment to do it on a larger scale, some bigger tanks. And so 2019 was the first year that we did a lot of it. And this particular Syrah was a 300 liter barrel lot that we particularly enjoyed on its own and had enough to put it out there. And so we did. So this is the first release. So this is a few rows that used to go into our rosé, dry rosé. So we picked them around the time we were picking stuff for rosé, but they always looked like red wine. I mean, they looked like red wine grapes, right? They looked right, but the potential alcohol was lower. So they seemed like a natural fit for this wine. So this was, it's about 3 to 5% Viognier, all whole clusters, put in a tank with CO2, sealed up for about 13 days, and then pulled out, stepped on, finished fermenting on the skins like typical red wine, and then pressed into 2 neutral 300-liter barrels, and then bottled after around 12 months without filtering or refining, clocking at a whopping 12.5% alcohol, which is pretty fun for us. And so,
Yeah.
Anyway, it's an exciting wine for us.
Yeah, this is super juicy and definitely kind of that wine that you could have as a nice red wine for the summertime. And let's be honest, in Arizona, in Texas anyway, it feels like summer at least until October. So
for sure.
it's going to be almost in the 90s today in Texas anyway. So this is the kind of wine I would want to drink. And I love that, this is a legitimate expression of Syrah. Like, it's got the nice blue fruit characteristic on it. It's got black pepper. It's got the things you want, but it's built more like the Beaujolais, like you're talking about, like that juicy, quenchy kind of style, but it's fresh. And I'm glad you brought that up, that, in these warmer climates, we can get the ripeness, but it is hard to maintain that acidity. So then how do you bring things into balance? And this is a really great way to do that. I really like this wine. So is this the first time y'all done single varietal Syrah, or
No.
at least in this way?
Yeah, so we do mostly blends. Varietal wines aren't off the table for us, but they anyway. So we're totally open to it, and this one made sense. And then we made twice as much this year because we were really happy with this one, and we had the fruit to do it. And I think this leads to an interesting discussion too about finding a place, right? So like we, like many people, are in love with drinking those wines from those Cru Beaujolais wines, but we're not going to plant Gamay here, right? We're not going to. That's not that So you have to look at what tools do you have to work with in your toolbox to accomplish the same thing,
right?
And so it's back to you maybe start off by covering the songs from your favorite bands, but at some point you got to write your own stuff, or
I love that.
You got to do it, or it's not that interesting. And so you can be inspired by that stuff, but you have to reinterpret it through your place and make it your own thing. And so, anyways, it just happens that Syrah works. And we haven't talked about, we started a sparkling wine program, and I used to think that would be a disaster here, but it's because you assume you're okay, so we're going to use Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, which are not necessarily things that are going to work here. But then someday you wake up and you're we have other stuff we could use. So we use, for what we've got now, we're using Riesling, Tempranillo, and Grenache, and so you can come to a similar conclusion, but it's more your conclusion if you look to different places to accomplish the same things. That was pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. But I'll never forget, the first time we spoke, which was a few years ago, when I was writing a story for Guildsom about that included Arizona wine, and you sent me a can. You said, "I'm going to send you my sparkling wine," and it was in a can, and it was also a full 750. It was a liter.
It was a liter.
No, that was a liter. Oh, it was a liter.
Yeah.
That's right. And I was like, "Wow, this guy is bold. He's doing all sorts of fun stuff," and it was so delicious too. I mean. It's always great when all that works out, but I loved just, and this probably is a good segue into the fact that, like you're saying, it's good to look to other regions for perhaps the right grapes you should be growing, but in the end, you have to, make the wines that are going to, kind of represent the actual regions in Arizona the best. And so, like you said, blends tend to be a popular thing, especially for you guys. I also have, I didn't tell you, but I also pour one of your white wines, the Mescioli, which it's going to show it backwards on the screen, but is that how you say it?
Yeah, Mescioli.
So I did it because the white grapes that you guys are using are also worth noting. You've got, I have to read it off the label, but you've got Albarino, Viognier, Malvasia, which I know Malvasia Bianca is a very big grape for Arizona, but you guys have brought in a lot of other stuff like Petit Manseng, Kerner, Roussanne. And so this is a blend of all of those grapes, and it just has this really beautiful balance to it. Talk about some of these varieties that you've kind of zeroed in on and really like working with.
Okay, yeah. So I think this, you're right. This does work with what we're talking about. It's like a rose by any other name kind of thing, but the opposite. Yeah. So you're looking for how do you achieve balance and how do you make something that's delicious? And the goal is to make delicious. It's to tell the story of the year, and we have vintage variation, and so that's cool. but it also, the story has to be delicious. It can't be a bad story, you know.
Yep. Yep.
So see, we're kind of looking for a constellation of things that'll work together and consistently tell that story. And so it's kind of like making, our good friend Charlene Badman at F&B, if you talk to her about how you have to make a salad, you can throw together a salad with anything, but you just got to make sure you got all the parts. You got to have some crunchy, you got to have some chewy, you got to have like fresh, salty, like you got to have all the things.
Yep.
And so we're looking for like, fruit, aromatics, acid, and, some fat. And then the way we make this wine in particular, it's kind of like two wines in one. So we pick all the white grapes from the Cimarron vineyard, and this is how we do it now. It could change next year. This is just how we do it right now. We pick all the varieties as they become ripe, but there's a lot of co-fermentation that happens. So they start like in a big concrete tank, and then we'll inoculate that. And then as that grows too big, sometimes we'll bleed it down and then start bleeding it down into barrels. And for this wine, it's a mix of concrete egg-shaped tanks and 500-liter barrels. This particular one that you're having the barrels were actually Italian acacia wood,
cool.
Which is kind of a fun thing we're playing with there. And then Kelly and I taste all the components blind, and we make a wine called White, and we make a wine called Mescoli. And so we just pull all the vessels, taste them blind, and then try to imagine how to make the two best wines, that have different characters. So like White, we want to be bright, approachable, easy with food. This wine, we want to have a little more distinctive quality to it. This one is in ages for like 12 months to 6 months, and we kind of try to carve out two wines. And it doesn't always work. Some years there's only one wine in there, and so Mescoli is the one that gets cut if it doesn't. Usually gets cut if it doesn't work out. So
yeah, I love it because it does have so many characteristics. I mean, you're even getting like ginger on there, like fresh ginger and things like that. It's just, sorry for those of you watching that aren't tasting it, but I think it does a great job of, like you said, that kind of mixture of texture, weight, but also vibrancy and everything else. This would be a great food wine as well. So I think like I mentioned Petit Manseng here a second ago, I think it's also worth mentioning a few of some of the other producers in Arizona that are kind of in like in this ball game of figuring out which grapes are going to work in the different soils and climate that you guys have, but are also kind of pushing it forward that this is clearly Arizona terroir, if you will. And so a little while ago you mentioned Kid Callaghan as like someone that you kind of started getting information from early on. Like, how do you see kind of where his role has played in the past, couple of decades as Arizona's gotten started?
Yeah. So I don't know. He's the guy. Kent's like tireless in his pursuit, and so he's definitely someone that I look up to, and a lot of folks look up to. In fact, when we tried to figure out where to plant a vineyard in Sonoyta, we got the property as close to his vineyard as we could because that seemed like the right thing to do. But yeah, Kent's done it from the very beginning. Has done a good job of seeking out stuff that potentially is more well suited here. And then and the truth is, you don't know until you put it in the ground. So you have to stick it in the ground and then see what happens. And there's a lot of surprises. And sometimes there's things that you think on paper are for sure going to work, but then they go through different like iterations of the experience here, and it doesn't work out. Tempranillo is a good example. I thought he was brilliant playing Tempranillo in Sonoyta. We planted Tempranillo in Sonoyta. We have it in Wilcox. I think it works great in Wilcox. It seems to do really poorly with late spring frost, and so in Sonoyta, that starts to make it not so hot. I mean, we still have a lot of it, but it's back to like there's the question of what tastes delicious, and then what produces that reliably in quantities that you can make a living from. And so there's things that can be delicious. Zinfandel is a great example. Kent used to make really fantastic Zinfandel, but it's so prone to rot. Its clusters are so tight, skins are so thin, and it ripens around the time we get monsoon moisture that, you can make a delicious wine, but like, is it worth it? Like for what you have to go through to get it. Anyway, and so Kent seems to have not tired of that. And so he's brought in some Tannat a few years ago and had a lot of success with that. So then he went to Manseng, which is kind of the white brother to the Tannat, and has had success with that, and kind of doesn't stop. And so it's challenging and encouraging, because then you just kind of feel like it's like your crime fighting duo, and you got to get back to back and be like, I'll take this stuff, you take that stuff, we'll see what works out, and then if they have like a hit, you got to copy it. So like you got to,
Right.
man saying it's not worked great for Kent. So yeah, we had to pick that up.
Yeah.
So
well, I think that's what I found really interesting about Arizona wine and kind of the research for this book is that, I often love to refer to like New Zealand wine as having like this purity of fruit. In fact, I did not make that up. New Zealand's kind of nailed it in terms of that's just this, they have this amazing acidity and brightness and everything. And obviously we talked about how brightness and acid are more difficult in this warmer climate. But I feel like when I take from almost all of the wines that I tasted in Arizona, there is a purity of fruit. And part of that must be from the fact that y'all aren't restricted right now in terms of what you can grow. And so you're trying to lean into figuring out what does do well and what gives you the best fruit qualities each year. I feel like Kent has done a great job with that with Petit Manseng, and I've been amazed at his Cab Franc as well. But I mean, I also love like walking through the vineyard with you in Sonoyta, the Pronghorn Vineyard, and kind of looking at some of the things that you guys are pulling up and putting in. Like, what are some of the grapes that people might be surprised to know that y'all are working with or experimenting with right now?
Oh yeah. So one grape we're super excited about is Bronick from Macedonia or Montenegro, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah.
We've got a selection from Montenegro, and that seems very promising here. It buds out later than almost late as anything, and it ripens, but it ripens in the mid section. It's got really thick skin, so it seems less prone to rot, and the wine's been delicious. That's promising. We added Marzalon, which is something I really wanted to add for a while, which seems potentially really well suited to the area. Things we put in this year. We put in a little, not Zerolo, but the other one. Give me a minute. Anyway, to think about our sparkling program. What's that?
Perrietta or?
Yeah, Parriata.
Yeah, Parriata.
We added that. We added some Chenin Blanc. And it was fun. We added we added Cab Franc, a significant amount to the vineyard this year, and it's Cimarron. Some other fun things, and you never know. Like I said, you have a lot of hope. Like Lagrine's one of them. We added Lagrine a few years ago, and I really liked that. We took like a tiny harvest. We probably shouldn't have, just to see. And then the second year we pulled fruit. It really seemed like it wasn't going to be a good fit. The skins are really thin. They almost like came off in our pickers' hands when they were trying to pick him. This year, I was down on it. It wasn't looking like it was going to work. It didn't look like it wanted to get ripe. We pulled it, and we pulled it at low potential alcohol because it seemed ripe, and I really like it. So it's like it gets a stay of execution. It'll get like another year or two to see. Maybe we're just not paying attention right.
Right.
Maybe we're just not understanding what it's trying to tell us. So that's what I'm excited about. And I'm excited about Kerner from Alto Adige. And it was interesting. We were in that part of the world, and we were at Alois Lager. My pronunciation on this is terrible.
Alois Lager. Yeah, fantastic property. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we were there because we're looking for things that will work for us. They're like a warm place in a cool region.
Yes.
All relative. And we were interested in these varieties, and then we're there, and we'd notice that they're growing like Mourvedre, Viognier, Manseng, right, or Tannat, one of the two. Anyway, and it kind of like blew my mind. And they were thinking about as things warm up there, they're looking at stuff we've already got. So
that's right.
It felt like there's kind of a connection. And and I love Riesling, but if we're gonna get it to like dry white world, it runs into ripening during monsoon, which makes it prone to rot. So
right.
We're looking for something like Kerner that might work better, and that's part of the fun of being here, and trying to figure out what works. And at our best, we'll do stuff that other people won't do. Does that make sense? Like
right.
We're not trying to be the whole menu. We want to have an important spot on the menu that other places don't necessarily fit, and so we have to try this stuff. And things like Tempranillo, where it plays first fiddle in Rioja, Graciano's kind of second. You plant the two here, and you find out Graciano is actually probably the better performer here. Mm-hmm. And I think it shows the promise of the place or the importance of the place. and the uniqueness of it.
Yeah.
So I had a point in there. Did we get to it?
No, well, this is what's cool is that you have spanned a lot of different grapes with a lot of really interesting regions as a cross. So like Alto Adige being a perfect one, right? Like people think of that being more alpine region and things like that, but in the lower elevations, they get warm and they get humid, and they have other issues that they deal with. Which brings me to a question I want to ask you, and that is, you've mentioned things like late spring frost. You've mentioned monsoons. Like for people that have never been to Arizona, tell me about that challenge. When are these monsoons happening, and why is that catastrophic?
Yeah. So people think of Arizona, they think of Phoenix, they think swirl cactus and blazing heat, and that's definitely got to be our problem, or one of our issues, and it's not. Our issues is somewhat counterintuitively are cold, wet, wet weather related. So because of the altitude, we always run the risk of late spring frost and early fall frost.
Yeah.
And then we get all our moisture, most of our moisture, starting in like late July through August, which they call the monsoon season, where we get these like massive thunderstorms. And so, you want to look for things that can ripen on the early side of that and on the late side of that, and come out doing well. And there's a question I want to answer about rootstock, but I'll finish this.
Yes.
And so, like this year, we had late spring frosts, and it was like early late, so it wasn't as obvious or dramatic as when the shoots are all out and they get frosted and they die. It was just as buds were beginning to swell, and it got cold enough to damage, the primary shoot. And so we experienced, we had less crop load, and then it was hot this year. It was hot everywhere. But then in Sonoyta, we had 2 massive hailstorms that, for our vineyard, completely wiped it out. We ended up not picking any fruit from that vineyard because we had these 2 hailstorms about 10 days apart, and you're looking at, gosh, are we going to try to like salvage what's out there, or are we just going to focus on keeping plants healthy? And I think just for where we were, and kind of what we did too, because after the first, we kind of identified blocks this year that we thought we could salvage, and we went through and pulled off all the fruit we didn't want to pick to try to focus on the stuff we thought was viable. And so that's really all that was left. So when that second storm came, it was like they were easier targets. And so so those are part of what make the place unique. And we didn't have kind of the monsoon activity we can normally count on. So we always complain about it because it makes harvest decisions difficult. But this year, the lack of it never slowed things down. So we never had that cloud cover. It never cooled off, and so the harvest was more compressed. So we get like massive diurnal swings. Like right now, we're still looking mid-90s, which is way warm for this time of year. But then we're going into it's 50 is the low. So we've got like a 45. Is that right? 45 degree temperature swing.
Right.
Which is pretty dramatic for growing. But
Yeah.
let's talk about rootstock. I think that's a fun question. So, early on we were heavy, 1103P and 110R, two really drought tolerant rootstocks. We ended up selling most of the 1103P seems like a really solid, strong rootstock for here. We tried 140R because we have a lot of calcium, and we thought that would work. And I think a lot of folks think it's too vigorous in California, if I remember correctly, but we decided against it. We tried it with Syrah because I think there was an incompatibility, if I remember, with 1103P and Syrah, but we just dropped Syrah altogether in the pronghorn vineyard because it doesn't seem to do well in windy weather. It doesn't know when to close up, and anyway, that's a different story. And then we're really excited. We start. I was talking to a guy in Languedoc. I was talking to his name will come to me in a minute. Michel Gassier about Syrah there, and he was talking about their soil and how the pH is high. So we have a lot of bicarbonate load in the soil here, and so the pH of the soil is pretty high, and that can be challenging. And so he was telling me about this vineyard that had this high pH, and he said they used a rootstock called Faircal, which I was not familiar with, but I guess they use it a lot in Champagne, and it's Faircal, like for ferrous and calcium, I guess. And so that's what we have. The Cimarron or Pronghorn Vineyard is red clay in the back, white calcareous cobbles, cliche in the front. And so we finally got a hold of some Faircal and planted some stuff on it this year. and I'm excited to see how that works. And we also have a ton of stuff that's own rooted because lobster is not really an issue here. So
Really? So you can do a lot of own rooting?
yeah, like the whole 9-acre addition to the Cimarron vineyard we planted in 2012 is all own rooted. A lot
Yeah,
of the replants in Sonoyta are own rooted.
that's interesting. Yeah, that is definitely not something everyone can do. But yeah, with the soils you have, I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
Um, so we're kind of, I don't want to take I don't want to take your time too much and everyone else's, but I think, one of the hopes that I had in writing this book was just to kind of, give a little bit more than an overview, right? Like we're talking about soils and climates and things like that and your challenges. But what do you hope people can take away about Arizona wine? If they're just kind of glimpsing it for the first time, they get to taste some of these different wines. Like, what would you like people most to know about it?
So I think, I don't know, I think we don't got like none of us have to be your favorite band, right? Like we don't have to be your favorite wine. You don't have to have it like every night, and we don't have enough to supply that sort of demand. But if you like wine, there is a wine in Arizona that you will enjoy, or a producer that you will enjoy, or multiple wines you enjoy.
Yeah.
I mean, just like you're not going to like every cab made from Napa. You're going to have some favorites. There's going to be some wines here that you'll enjoy it. So that part of the fun is finding that, right? Like the discovery of that, and then we just want to be like on your rotation, like we want to be in your playlist, and I think there's some fun in that. There's some fun in introducing people to new stuff, and then also the wines taste different. I mean, they're not the same as anywhere else. So it's it adds a little variety to your life. And the book is great, by the way. I started reading it. I've selfishly read the Arizona part first. I skipped straight there, and then I'm going to back up to the Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas part.
Yes.
But yeah, what's great about it is that there's a lot of meat in there. I mean, there's a lot of it works as a travel guide. I'm doing a full-on plug-free book, so I think it's great. But it's a full-on travel guide in the sense that if like you're going to visit the regions, there's places to stay, places to eat. You can kind of hone in on the wineries you want to check out, and then but then there's if you want to dig in, there's some more stuff, and a lot of this stuff I haven't seen covered elsewhere, which is I think is really cool. It's a really great resource to give people what they need to know to start their exploration. And then depending on where you live, a lot of these wineries can ship to you at home. So if you want to kind of have a sneak preview before you come visit, when that happens again for all of us, you can do it. So anyway, yeah, I was really impressed. I don't know how you, and as you noted in the beginning of the book, like it's a large area to cover. Colorado, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. That landmass is that's a pretty big wine region to cover.
It's massive. Yeah.
So,
yeah, my hope is that, with COVID and stuff, like I noticed, for instance, like you and Callaghan were doing some fun, like virtual tastings and things like that. And I think it would be so cool. Like as someone in Texas, I'm like, I would love to be able to buy a pack, like a 6-pack, and it's got 6 different producers from Arizona. And it's like Arizona pack once a month, or like, New Mexico or Colorado and stuff like that. There's laws I know that are involved with all of that. But I think it would be really cool for people that are wanting to explore it, but may not have distribution in their state yet of multiple different wines from these states. It would be really cool just so that people can get to experience these wines in a creative way,
Yeah, it is challenging. It's like you were saying, Ken and I did that early on, and Arizona makes it tough because we're allowed to ship our own wine, we're not allowed to ship other people's wines. And if we're doing in a couple weeks, we're doing a one-off. We're gonna do a little sparkling Zoom session. One wine for each of us.
I've got that sparkling wine. I'm excited.
Yeah, but it's only 2 bottles, right? So like, neither of us can ship both, and so you're looking at shipping like 1 bottle of each, which costs about as much. Well, for us right now, it costs the same as if we're shipping 3 bottles. So the economics are a little out of whack, but it's just part of like we talked about, or you talked about in the book even. The challenges of an emerging region go beyond growing and making. It's like convincing people that you should have the freedom to do stuff they do in other successful places, especially when a lot of times you're facing legislative folks who find it hard to believe that you're even doing what you're doing beyond like a hobby level in your state. It sounds like, oh, that's cute. You guys are screwing around with grapes and in the desert. Like, you want us to change laws for you too. But one of if you wanted to try to find a bright spot in the darkness of COVID, like I think they did it in Texas and they did it here, where they started letting restaurants sell wine to go, in cocktails to go. There's a strong case to be made for in this new world that we're going into. We have to look at things differently, and that consolidation, especially in the Southwest where it's a little too warm to ship in the summertime. If you're going to get your product to consumers who used to come visit you and aren't visiting you anymore, and they used to buy your wine in restaurants, but they can't buy your wine in restaurants anymore because the restaurants aren't open. You need creative avenues to get your product to people, and then once you open that road, you find out it's a pretty nice road. Everybody kind of likes this road, and there's not a lot of danger. I'm going with this analogy. I like it, but like it's a safe road, right? Like you open it up and you find out like nothing bad happened. In fact, everybody's happy. This is a good thing. Let's do more of it.
Yeah. I mean, that would be my hope. I think the direct to consumer thing has gotten a lot bigger, and with all of the COVID kind of repercussions. And so, I mean, obviously a lot of laws have to change, but I think it would be a really great way to go. People love being able to explore that way. And like you said, if they can't get out to you, it's a great way for you to get to them. Well, Todd, I am so grateful for your time. I personally, in doing the book, have learned so much about Arizona wine, and my hope is that more and more people learn about it, not only outside of Arizona, but also within Arizona. And I'm just grateful to have you as a part of it, and I hope it is represented well.
Yeah, no, it was beautiful. We're always appreciative for the attention, and I think you should be really proud. I think it's an outstanding book. Like, I'm excited for it. I mean, like I said, I of course went right to our stuff, but like I'm excited to learn about Colorado, Texas, and New Mexico, because like where are you gonna go? And it's good to get your information from sources other than like the tourism folks, because you're not trying to sell anything, which makes it great.
Right.
I mean, besides the book, but it makes it great.
Right.
So yeah, and it's really well written and enjoyable to read. So.
Thank you so much. Well, I hope you guys, if you are interested in reading it, you can find it. It's The Wines of the Southwest USA, and you can find it on my website at jessicadupuy.com. You can find that link in my bio on Instagram if that's more helpful. And if you order it, I will sign it for you. And you'll get to learn more about Todd and all of the other producers in Arizona, but also New Mexico, Colorado, and Texas. So Todd, thank you so much. Please give Kelly a hug for me, and
I will. She's out there doing real work somewhere, so.
Yeah, I know. She's the one that does the real work. That's why I asked you to talk to me.
Yeah. We have to make sure there's still things getting done.
Yes. Well, thank you guys so much, and thanks to everyone who attended. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having
us. Take care.
Appreciate it. Bye.